this in a half a day presentation, but what we hope to do is sort of like to give you some snippets of the work carried out, with the hope that some of the tools, the approaches, the guides that were prepared will be useful for some of you as well. So we'll have a presentation from Greg, which sort of like sets the stage, if you want. Greg will discuss a bit about some of the key challenges that functional areas in the EU have to deal with. He will discuss why functional area approaches are important. Obviously, cohesion policy dedicates lots of attention and resources to functional area approaches. We hope this will continue. Second presentation will be given by Yondela, and she will discuss the methodological toolkit, which has just been finalized. It's the most, or let's say the key deliverable under this project, which discusses several ways in which functional area approaches can be strengthened. The focus is, and the recommendation target the 700 plus functional areas in the EU, or at least that's the number of functional areas we managed to identify. Obviously, the high number is an indication that this is an issue of importance to all the member states. And then I will finish with a presentation that goes through some of the results of this work with a focus on some of the activities we undertook with the 12 functional areas that received targeted support. We'll have a question and answer session at the end. For the sake of time, we recommend, I mean, if you have questions, you can place them in the chat box at any time. But to have a sort of more organized discussion, we propose to keep the questions for the session at the end. But obviously, if there's burning questions, you can ask after each individual presentation. Maybe just announce yourself with the hand in Zoom, or like enter the question in the chat box. For those of you that don't know already, most of the results, the guides, the tools, the approaches, the exchanges organized are available on the website functionalareas.eu. I'm going to put it in the chat box here. We're quite proud of ourselves that we managed to secure this this name. Interestingly, we have partnered with colleagues at Portico, and will migrate most of the material from this website will be migrated to Portico. Obviously, this website will still be available, but just so you know, several of these materials, best practices, guides will also be available on the Portico website, which is sort of like one of the main repositories of the European Commission. With that being said, we're 5 minutes in. I see we have hefty numbers of people connected, probably, and there's more connected. But for the sake of time, I will turn over to Marek with many thanks again for originating this project. I speak on behalf of the bank team. It's been one of the most interesting projects we worked on, a lot of fun and a lot of memorable experiences. So with many thanks again, Marek, over to you.
Marcel, thanks a lot, and good morning, everyone. I mean, you already outlined a very interesting program for today. Well, unfortunately for you, I'm the only obstacle now, which is in between this interesting program and well, the audience, yourself. Well, I promise I'll be short. I mean, I will not have a presentation as such, but I wanted to say first few words before you will kick off with today's agenda in the conference. And well, first of all, I'm glad that we have today, the opportunity to present the outcome of the technical assistance project focused on functional area approaches, and I'm glad I could be there to little bit save the few words on the rationale which we were following with that. And as Marcel mentioned, and clearly cohesion policy recognizes the important role of functional areas for regional development. Functional area approach helps to overcome fragmentation, inefficient action caused by administrative boundaries, ensures a more coordinated action between territories as well. I mean, I'm sure that you will hear much more about it in a dedicated presentation on that. It also stimulates cooperation between different territorial actors, which is necessary precondition for successfully addressing complex challenges related to multiple transitions. And they are not, this is not a negligible parameter. There is an overflow or pressure of different challenges. We had also experienced successive crises which are impacting different territories, actors, the way they are actually reacting. And I think that getting together, working together, is an important ingredient which should provide for solutions to these solving very complex challenges. With this project that the Director General for Regional and Urban Policy carried out jointly with the World Bank, we first of all aim to promote functional area approaches and concretely support actors that wish to advance in operationalization of their functional concepts, as well as to strengthen cooperation and, well, within those functional areas, and be better equipped to implement these joint investments which could potentially flow as a result of this approach. As you know, cohesion policy is intervening across different territorial levels, and needless to say that the place-based investments, place-based approaches are in the cohesion policy's DNA. Functional approach in itself is not new to the policy. We saw some 700 functional areas and investments, roughly around 8 billion euro, which were already deployed during the programming period 2014-20. And we are glad to see that we have an important jump or increase in 21-27 generation of programs of the cohesion policy, where we have more than 20 billion, which is programmed only for the functional urban area. So it's an important step. This is really something that shows the growing interest and recognition of the approach for the regional development. And it certainly offers a momentum that we would like to build on, especially in terms of a knowledge, capacity building, and sharing of experiences. Our second aim or objective with this project was also to learn and capitalize on the work with the selected functional areas, because we are perfectly aware we cannot work hands-on with all the functional areas in the EU. But on the basis of the work we carried out in particular with the 12 functional areas, to share the results with others who are interested, consolidate workable solutions and tools in a methodological toolkit. And then you will hear much more about it in a dedicated presentation. I'm glad that with this project, we could really make a very concrete contribution to the efforts which are being carried out daily by the different stakeholders across different member states. And maybe just to illustrate with few deliverables, what we managed to bring in over 2 years while supporting 12 functional areas. We had worked on 12 action plans, which included 66 individual actions with very concretely tuned to the specific situations of these project realities from different member states. The project animated 11 knowledge exchange activities with more than 1,000 participants participating in those knowledge exchange activities, and was able to extract 63 best practices collected across different functional area approaches. You will see, aggregation of that, or you will hear aggregation of that in the presentations, but you will certainly be able to access it through the website, which Marcel mentioned in his presentation, and they will be translated also to the toolkit. So, all the knowledge and experiences of the project, our objective was that we make it accessible for everyone, for any functional area, and particularly those which were not able to benefit from the hands-on support. Therefore, we will, as I said, aggregate it in the toolkit to equip all those who are implementing functional approach, or they are considering to start implementing it or initiating it, with practical tools and real life examples, experiences, which also will be many of them shared in today's conference. Now, maybe I'll get now to the point which Marcel was actually introducing me into my time slot. Well, I would like to thank, first of all, for the commitment of participating in functional areas and the expertise which was delivered for the World Bank. It would not be sincerely possible to deliver the project without their passionate and highly professional contribution. So really many thanks to Marcel and the team, really pushing over 2 years, delivering on the project, but also all those who were participating and working very closely hand in hand, but also those who were, following the project itself, were contributing also to its success. So I will not continue further, because certainly, as you heard, there is much more to come to learn from and to dive into, because it was really a rich experience on the different levels of activity. So I would conclude my address here, and I would like to wish all of you success with today's event. And I do hope that we will have opportunity to exchange on functional areas, perhaps in a very, very concrete way through the work of the cohesion policy, or in other fora. And this project will represent and will, kind of exemplify also the contribution from the side of the Director General for Regional and Urban Policy, and signify the importance which we attach to functional approach. So I will stop here. Marcel, over to you.
Marek, the moment you stopped, we passed the 200 threshold. So it was momentous, perfect timing, I would say. Just to thank you again, and we'll do it throughout this, with due apologies for being very syrupy. Maybe to mention that when we originally started, the aim was to focus on 2 functional areas. There was a smaller budget, smaller timeline, testament to the way you designed into the flexibility that let's say we went from 2 functional areas to 24, much grander scope, more ambitious activities. I think the results will show too, but we have to thank again for originating the idea, and then for the flexibility, and then for the innovative approach we used as we designed this, as we moved along. As I don't think there's something similar out there. So many thanks again, and then without further ado, I'll turn over to Greg to lead us into the series of presentations.
Thanks, Marcel. Thanks for kicking us off. And Marek, thanks for great introduction, and fully agreeing with you that we also convene big thank you to all the participants. I mean, you've put a lot of effort into this activity. I know we've been bugging you for 2 years, so it was a great journey. And so I'll present to you set of recommendations and insights that we came up with from this project, and we call them the recommendations for enhanced territorial dimension in EU. And when we talk EU, it's please think about EU in the sense of, your regions, your countries, but also EU level. So, we are talking about the broad aspect of the European Union. Marek already provided a kind of idea or reason behind this project. So I'll just glance over the key items of four foci of this project. So you see, we've been trying to strengthen the collaboration between the municipalities, so interjurisdictional or supralocal collaboration. We try to also think about how to enhance the flow of funds or the access to the EU funds in those functional areas. And we tried to foster the knowledge exchange because we strongly believe in networking and learning from each other, so peer learning. Finally, the last one was about the last target or last goal was to develop the tools and methodologies to strengthen the collaboration and functioning of your entities. And so this is four ways how we tried, and we hope that how we managed to support the functional area. So on the one hand, we've been trying to enhance the coordination between the municipalities in your entities and helping you to think how to strengthen this collaboration. We are also thinking how to like which funds or how to channel the funds from the EU funds into your investments, how to prioritize those investments, how to select the proper investments that are most relevant for you. Many of you also took the part in opportunities that the Commission provides to network and exchange information, so TAIEXs and other sorts of the exchanges. So this is the number 3. And the 4th is we also try to create, and we are still working on creating a community of practice for the European for the functional areas in the EU. So this is kind of like the overall goal of the project. And now moving a bit to a short overview of our participants. As you see, we are talking about the 12 functional areas in the 8 countries in the Tier 1. So this is the group that obtained the hands-on approach. We had countries from Croatia, Czech Republic, Greece, Hungary, Poland, Romania, and Slovakia. And those were the 12 that got the most targeted support over this project. You can see that those functional areas are different type. There are smaller, there are larger, there are functional urban areas, there are functional non-urban areas. We have participants of a size that are around 10, 15 municipalities in the functional areas, but we have also functional areas that are much more complex, of around 200 or 300 municipalities. So we are talking really about very various, pack or crowd, which was also very interesting. There is the overview of the 12 functional areas that were in the Tier 2 group, which where we provided more of the hands-off support, providing some kind of workshops, trainings, but also intensively sharing information that we produce with the other functional areas or in other projects of the bank. And here you also see there are additional countries. For instance, we have Lithuania here as well, but otherwise Poland, Romania, Slovakia, and Croatia. So this was the short overview. And then why do we think that FA, so the functional area approach, matter for development? And I think that this is, for us, this is a crucial question. And we see that there is an increasing complexity and scale of development challenges, something that Marek already mentioned. And we think that, working with you, looking at different development directions and dynamics, we see that some of those challenges cannot be or could be more effectively managed by at the scale or at the level of the functional areas. So we are thinking that sometimes neither municipality nor the NUTS2/NUTS 3 level dichotomy is not always the most the best tool to approach those challenges. And this is because we are thinking that the functional areas, they provide a bit of different of territorial scale, much bigger resources. They provide bigger resources, and they provide coordination that is, somewhere in between the municipality level and the NUTS 2 level. And a couple of examples where we think that the functional areas could be especially relevant. Those are like the ones that are mentioned here. So green transition, just transition, those are the challenges that right now are pretty much at the forefront of debate in every of our countries. We are also talking about more sectoral topics like spatial planning. We're talking about green-blue infrastructure and managing that. We are talking about quality public services, delivery of quality public services, especially I think in the relevant in terms of the functional areas topic is mobility and solid waste management. So what we are thinking is that, or what we see, there is a need that there is that a modified approach to territorial targeting would be useful. And when we are saying this territorial targeting, we are thinking again about the action at every level, so regional, national, and European. So like we've been thinking like how to picture this. And in my personal view, like a metaphor of painting or a painter makes a lot of sense. That's, for instance, you have the large brushes, which are NUTS 2 level, and you can paint a picture with nice background with the large brushes. Then you have the tiny details that are municipalities. But then in between, when you want to go into middle ground, you need also a different tool. And I mean, from our perspective, the functional area is a tool that provides you with the ability to draw something in between the very small details and the large picture. That's why we think that the functional areas make a lot of sense. And this is about why we think that how can the functional area approaches strengthen the development efforts in Europe. We see that functional areas can be the entry points for strengthening what is the core of the European principles. Yeah? So we are talking about place-based approaches, we are talking about people-based approaches, and we are talking about the sustainable investment. And this is, again, like equally important through all the levels of multi-level governance. Yeah, European again, national, regional. And we see that the application of functional area approaches brings plenty of benefits. And we just mentioned three here, which we think are most important. So first is the injecting flexibility into the existing planning framework. So again, something like expanding the dichotomy of municipal NUTS 2 level tools and adding an additional one, which is the functional area approach. We think that the functional area approaches are reinforcing the key principles of European agenda, and this is our development policy that I already mentioned. Again, people-based, place-based sustainability. And so we also think that the functional area approaches, they also enhance performance of the development instruments. And we are talking here about economies of scale, so supra-level interventions. We are thinking about limiting the duplication of efforts. If you have, those several painters painting with small brushes, their details, and they don't always coordinate between each other. So functional areas, we think, have a potential to bring this coordination, much needed coordination. And finally, the establishment of the sustainable supralocal territorial partnerships. And you will see across this today, we'll be talking a lot about sustainability and about lasting collaboration, because the functional areas are not about the one-off collaboration of implementing a specific project, but they are more about a different approach to development. Again, we are not thinking about changing what currently, like revamping what already exists, but enriching what we have right now. And we've been requested to focus today at this presentation on the recommendations that are, let's say, down to earth, and that do not go into like a systemic and more abstract recommendations. But so that's for that reason, I'll present a set of selected recommendations that we drew from our work, and we'll divide them into groups. So the first group pertains to the area of policy. So like think about the vision and decision-making processes. And the second group focuses on specific thematic areas where we see that the functional areas have the potential to contribute. So let me jump to those recommendations, starting maybe with the bottlenecks that or the thematic challenges that you as a functional areas provided at the beginning of our project. As you see, there is a plethora of topics that you said are of key importance for you. And I mean, please keep it also in mind, because at the end of this presentation, we will ask you for your inputs to your existing challenges and opportunities. But this is something that you said to us, that where you see the problems or the challenges lie in front of your functional areas. And you see it's very, very broad. Yeah, I mean, it starts with strategic and spatial planning. It's about housing. It's about blue-green infrastructure, cooperation, governance, circular economy. I mean, pretty much it covers the whole aspect of policy making. And this also shows that functional areas can touch on all the topics. So we'll talk a bit, briefly about some of those thematics later on. We also came up with the challenges that we identified that could be important for strengthening of the functional area approaches. And again, like we are talking about the different level of multi-level governance. So we think that they are relevant for all the levels. So talking the regional, national, and European. And I'll mention a couple of them, or I will dwell upon some of them later in the presentation. But just to short address all of them, we see that there is a lacking vision or the insufficient vision of the functional areas and their role. We think that the mapping or the standardized mapping or some kind of a definition of functional areas, which is more standardized right now, would be useful. We also see that the functional areas are not that visible to all the stakeholders in the system or in the policymaking process as the traditional administrative units. So think about municipalities and regions, for instance. We also think that collaboration is difficult. I mean, it's not always easy. I mean, if you participate in any kind of an NGO or a community or a board of your housing of your house, that bringing people together and making decisions, and the long-term decisions, I mean, is not always easy. So we think that the competition between municipalities, makes it difficult to initiate collaboration, and to sustain it is not always easy. So some kind of incentives from outside are also useful, to overcome those challenges. We see that it would be great to have more capacity building instruments or tools that would be accessible to functional areas. And of course, I mean, when discussing with you, like many of you mentioned, that the data is crucial, and data is the functional area disaggregated data is a challenge in our environment, although EU as such is awash by the data. The three last challenges that we identified, we see that combining the strategic and spatial planning is a challenge, and I will discuss it a bit more in detail later on. And those incentives that are connecting to the challenge 4 and 5, that incentives for initiating lasting collaboration could be enhanced. And I think that this is one of the areas that are really important. Finally, the inclusion of functional areas in strategic dialogue is much needed. Sorry for taking that long, but we think that they are important. And again, like when you are discussing with your counterparts at any level of the multi-level governance, I think that this would be great to check with them their vision of how they see those challenges, and whether they agree, and what are their ideas for solving them. So some of the selected challenges and a bit of more detail about them, and I'll try to fit the rest of this presentation in some 10 to 12 minutes to be able to also have like a small exercise with you at the very end. So on the strategic goal, why we think that this is important for FAs, for functional areas, to have a strategic goal or a vision in the system. And we see functional areas as relatively young entities, you know, and since they are young, I mean, their mandate is relatively weak, and and as I said, I mean, the collaboration and initiating the collaboration among the municipalities to create the functional area takes effort, time, and commitment. So if you don't have a vision that your functional area or the functional area approach will be important in 5 years or in 10 years, that this is one of the tools that are important for the region, for the country, for the EU, there is a lesser, you know, level of commitment that you want to put into creating those functional areas. So that's why we think that this strategic goal is super important. I mean, having the long-term vision also allows you to shape the framework, the institutional, financial, a legal framework for those functional areas to cooperate. And the last point on this, we often think about the FAs as a synonym for the integrated territorial instruments or investments, but in fact they are not. So functional areas are not ITIs. ITI is a tool to channel EU money, but functional areas, this is a much broader concept, and of course functional areas can use ITIs, but this is not the only, you know, kind of dimension that we should be thinking about the functional areas. Capacity building. You know, we were thinking like whether to put the capacity building up front or as a second, but we thought that, you know, capacity building, it makes a lot of sense to build capacity. I mean, every time we say, you know, we want to implement complex projects, we want to implement integrated projects, but they are complex. I mean, they are not really always easy to implement. I mean, for that, you need to have strong capacity, but then if you don't have a vision, there is like no point of building capacity if you don't know whether this capacity will be, you know, important or relevant in 2 years. So that's why we thought vision first, capacity is the second. And we think that this capacity is important both in sectoral programs. So whether this is solid waste management, whether this is water, whether this is mobility, but also in terms of governance. I mean, super important aspect that we've learned during this project, governance aspects related to thinking about how the functional areas function. What are the specific models and tools and modalities of this collaboration that are efficient? Again, we are talking about different countries, different institutional setups, financial setups. I mean, each of you is a bit different. That's why it's important to think what works for you and which kind of governance structures are important for you. So that's why we think the governance is an important aspect in capacity building as well. So not only sectoral. And again, the capacity building help build sustainability of those functional areas. And that's why we also put a separate recommendation on governance. And I'll pretty much not repeat what I just said. But again, we think that this is sometimes a neglected area, especially, you know, because everyone is thinking about the sectoral investments. But we think that when we want to develop functional areas, we need to also pay attention how those functional areas are governed and how they function inside. And two more topics from the, let's say, this policy area. So strategic dialogue. We see that the functional areas are not always a full partner or like a partner on full rights in the discussions. Again, like we discuss with many regional authorities or national authorities, we see that, I mean, functional areas, you know, they appear in strategic documents, they are on the radar screen, but they are not always an equal partner. And, you know, coming back to the vision and to the capacity building, if you are not included in the strategic dialogue, then you are not able to exert, let's say, pressure, or you are not able to always enter the most important aspects for you in the policy making. That's why we think that including functional areas into the strategic dialogue is super important. And because this would also help shape the adequate policies, but also programs and instruments. So again, this is something to think about. And the final recommendation in this policy realm is data. We could have probably a separate seminar on data, because we had several discussions about that with statistical office, with ministries, but also with functional area stakeholders. And we strongly believe that what's measured, it gets done. If you don't have data at the functional area level, then it's really difficult to set up targets, to set up objectives, and then to monitor and evaluate. And right now, we simply understand that this is the functional area level. It's let's say again, a relatively new entity, and disaggregated data is not always available at this level. But we think that there is a need to make efforts into thinking how this could be amended, and what kind of data first is needed, and what kind of data is most useful. And again, this data is not only about data, but most of all, it's about monitoring and evaluation. And so because those two processes are crucial about like learning whether those approaches are functioning, whether they are effective, whether they are efficient, what could be improved. Without data, it's difficult. So again, that's why we put it as an important recommendation and area for work in this presentation. Now, switching gears to the more thematic topics, and those two slides are more kind of also the reasons why the functional areas are important, and functional area approaches. So we all know that we have in this part of the world, we are facing demographic decline and aging, and this is one of the challenges that Marek mentioned is facing Europe right now. And as you can see, there are parts of the Europe that are aging quicker. There are parts of the Europe that are aging less. And again, we think that the functional areas, because of their bigger territorial scope and bigger financial resources, can help deal with the effects or results of aging. Like think about the aging infrastructure, think about the need to finance the infrastructure that has been built. What happened if your territory, in the small municipality, if your population shrunk by 20%? So how you'll be able to maintain the infrastructure that you have? If you are working with other municipalities around you or local localities, then you have bigger scope. So again, we think that the functional areas have something to say here. And this is also kind of like more of a general reflection from our side. One of our reports on the rethinking like in regions also showed that, and this is kind of, I guess, not a surprise, but to revamp or to reinvigorate the growth in the Europe, one needs also strong cities and strong regions, and those regions are driven by usually by strong functional areas. So again, like reinvigorating functional areas, especially also the strong ones, will also help to drive the growth in the European Union and in your countries. And couple of thematic areas, and I will try to finish in 3-4 minutes. So we see spatial planning and strategic planning needs to be combined. Why is it important? Because we think that we see that this helps optimize investments. We see that combining spatial and strategic planning brings synergies between the usually insulated sectoral policies. And as you can see here on these two maps, this is a Cluj metropolitan area in 2000 and 2020 almost, and this place over 20 years grew a lot, and population doubled. Without proper spatial planning, this is gonna be chaotic development, this has an implication on embedded CO2 and will also affect like how much like what will be the quality of life of the future generation. So again, strategic planning, spatial planning is about efficiency, quality of life, and our future. The next one, and again, like sorry to go back. It's important that functional areas are super. We think that they have a great value added in this space, because if every municipality is just planning for its own relatively limited territory, then a bit of chaos may creep in, and we all saw that in different countries. That's why we think that collaboration in this spatial planning is at the level of functional areas is super useful. This also brings us to the collaboration between urban and rural territories. We know that this is a challenge, and also from the investment point of view, and we see that the functional areas that merge strong urban centers and more rural areas can support this collaboration and this link. And this may take very different aspects and or ways. And for instance, you can help develop the local food chains, near sourcing of materials, but you can also provide housing in the nearby areas and recreation. So there is a lot of possibilities for merging the strengths of both the rural and urban. We were thinking about putting here the slide about, in general, quality of public policies, public services like education, health, whatever you have. But we think that mobility is something that, when talking to you, to functional areas, was sticking out. This is, like many of you functional areas said, mobility is our key concern, and we think that we would like to work on that. And green mobility, of course, it talks about sustainability, and we see, again, like with spatial planning, if you do it just for a single municipality, it will not do. But thinking about, or it will do, but maybe to a not in such optimal way as it could be done when pulled together with other functional areas. And we already know that the solid waste management is working in many of the functional areas and across different countries. So that's why we didn't put the solid waste management here, but we saw that this is also an important thematic for the functional areas. Finally, housing. Again, this is about sometimes about this rural urban linkages and how people flow. We know that many of the cities or municipalities are depopulating, but the strong core cities are gaining population. And here, access to housing, adequate housing, affordable housing, also social housing is important. And again, at the level of functional area, we think that there is there's space for thinking together how to arrange the housing policies and how to mitigate the current problems. The last slide is the cross-border cooperation. Again, like we think that the functional area is about the intermunicipal collaboration and about going beyond just a border of an individual municipality or locality. But we also see that this is also important in Europe to work or to think about working across the national borders. So that's why we think that the cross-border collaboration is super important, and functional areas may lead the way here. This is the last slide that we had here from as a kind of like this general summary of our work and recommendations. And here is a short exercise for you, like hearing after this presentation. Would like to ask you to fill in your ideas about your key, on the one hand, opportunities, and on the other side, challenges. So you'll see that on the left-hand side, you see half of the page will be related to or devoted to your top challenge. And on the right-hand side, you'll see in the second your top opportunity. So you will see that on the left-hand side, each of you can take control of this whiteboard. And on the left-hand side, you can add sticky notes. So you can see that the fifth or the sixth icon on the left-hand side under the T letter, it's a symbol of a sticky note. So you can click on the sticky note and then place it either on the left or the right-hand side of the whiteboard, and you can put your answers into on the whiteboard. And then we'll try to use those answers of yours during the rest of the day to see how we address them, or whether we can have any comments related to those opportunities or challenges that you mentioned.
And then we'll save this at the end, sort of like the just to have sort of a nice picture on this. Maybe to add to what Greg said, and then to preface the next presentation that Yundela will be having on the methodological toolkit. Important to note that both the Hungarian and the Polish presidency have indicated functional areas as key areas of interest. In fact, there's a conference on July, if I'm not mistaken, July
11th or
11th and 12th in Balatonfüred, in Lake Balaton, and we thank Gabor and Eva for organizing this. Program is organized together with the European Committee of the Regions, and then the topic is functional areas' role in strengthening cohesion policy. We encourage you to attend if you can. And then from the discussions that Greg and Anna on our side had with the Polish government, it seems Polish presidency also wants to have functional areas as a top priority for their mandate. So obviously that's quite impressive, and we're really happy with the results and the interest in the topic.
Thanks, Marcel. I mean, super important topics about the presidency and about, you know, thinking about on the territorial dimension of one more also maybe comment or heads up to all of you. I mean, as we are filling this in, and I think that we'll give like more 2 minutes, and then we will close this exercise, is that we'll send a link to you regarding the evaluation of this work of this project. We would love to, you know, hear from you, like what do you think about the whole idea or the whole concept of the functional areas in the EU project, and to source from you information like what worked, what could be improved, and we would much appreciate your information about that, because this would be super valuable for both the DG Regio and for us to know what could be modified in similar projects in the future. We know that we bother you a bit recently with surveys, and Adina, you know, keeps reminding us that, you know, those surveys are too long and they are too complex, and we try to cut the length of them. But I mean, we would really love to, you know, hear from you. I mean, we believe that we've been together for 2 years, working hand in hand, and we would love to, you know, ask for 20 or 30 minutes of your time to fill in those surveys, because for us they are extremely useful, and that's why, you know, we plead for your collaboration in that aspect. All right. Okay. I think that's
maybe we can just zoom out for a second, Florina, if you can help us, if there's any other ideas, but otherwise we can wrap up, and then we'll save this, save the board for the end. Just so you know, we'll have similar exercises for the other presentations. So get ready. We see like most of you are comfortable to work with the board.
I zoomed out. I don't know if you are seeing my board as I'm seeing it. Otherwise, on below there is a line, and you can choose the percentage. I have it at 30%.
Okay. All right. Yes.
And when you are
control and zoom out, it will zoom out on your screen.
yeah, but individually, not if I'm zooming out. I cannot zoom your screen.
I manage
Yeah.
control and scroll. It works. All right. We've bested technology as well.
We see that, you know, data management, centralization on the side of the challenges, a bit of financial aspect as well. The ITI is not equal to the functional areas, the simplification, data, and knowledge. Yeah? And on opportunities, we have interest at the member state level. This is super important. Yes, so we agree. Prioritization of rural areas. Again, yes, we are not talking only about urban, but also about rural and peri-urban. We have specific projects, dedicated data management, peer-to-peer community and collaboration. Yes, this is something that we're still working on, and we hope that this will be one of the outcomes of this initiative. And we hope, you know, to provide or to use the existing tools to enhance the collaboration among the functional areas, cooperation between functional areas at the national and EU level, spot on. I think that those topics we will keep mentioning them in our next presentations by both Yondela and Marcel. Marcel, should we keep moving?
I think, yeah. So like we can, let's wait for the final thoughts, and then we can close the whiteboard, and then we'll move to Yondela's presentation. So Yondela, you ready?
Perfect. I will export and then share the presentation.
Thank you, colleagues, for your inputs here on the whiteboard.
Right. Yondela, time to shine. Oh wait, we have a heart. We have a heart. All right. Good to finish. Good to finish on a positive note. So Florina, we can close the whiteboard. We'll share the results after the conference. We'll communicate on this, and then we can move to Yondela's presentation.
Thank you, Marcel, and good morning, everybody. So I think before I even start, as Florina brings up the presentation, just to say that the toolkit, I think, Marcel, you made the point, the toolkit is in its final stages of preparation. We're just putting on the last dashes of makeup and lipstick. Once it is finalized, we will email it to everybody that's certainly attended today's meeting, but also put it up on the website. So you will certainly get an alert once it is available. So for the next, how much do I have, Marcel? 20 minutes or so?
We are on time, Yondela. So we went a bit overboard, but largely because I've been loquacious at sort of gregarious at the start. But Greg kept us on time.
Okay.
So I think we're good. We're good to go. Don't rush. Like if need be, like I can cut my presentation.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to take you briefly through the toolkit, the structure, the approach, and maybe dip in every now and then to some of the issues that are highlighted in the toolkit. It's good to see that from Greg's presentation, a lot of the challenges that you raised are actually addressed in the toolkit to some extent, but also some opportunities. So some of the areas that you've identified as opportunities are what we're reflecting as best practice or practical insights. I mean, here it would be preaching to the choir, really. You already appreciate that the lives that we live traverse administrative boundaries, the challenges that many of you deal with and opportunities that you try and extract in the areas that you govern over traverse administrative boundaries. And it's necessary, therefore, to deal with these opportunities and challenges across those boundaries. And this reality is acknowledged amongst others in the new Leipzig Charter. Why this toolkit? I mean, Greg's presentation got into this already, but I think just to reinforce, it's premised on the appreciation of the importance of this scale. So the middle-sized brush that Greg made reference to, just to borrow that analogy, and recognizes the efforts and energies that many of you are putting into trying to resolve and address issues at the scale, as well as the ambition of some municipalities or subnational authorities that are thinking about establishing functional area structures or intervening at that level. It's intended to guide and support practitioners, both elected and appointed practitioners. I mean, we interface during the course of this project, we interfaced with both. And it's also implementation focused. So it draws on practical experiences, tries to share some lessons from these, and provides tools. There was a question earlier on whether there are tools. You'll see when you get the toolkit that there are practical tools that are shared and that are also made available. And it covers the area of governance, planning, implementation, financing, monitoring, and evaluation. And if you think about the kind of virtuous cycle of governing, implementing, these are the elements that are necessary to have in place. And it is informed largely by input that we receive from the functional areas that we worked with. So you'll see a lot of your own work being reflected back to you. Moving on, just to also say that it complements two other recent publications. The one is the Handbook on Sustainable Urban Development, which was published in 2020, supporting sustainable urban development or SUDs in urban areas. The other one is the Handbook on Territorial and Local Development Strategies in 2022, focused on non-urban areas. And it kind of complements that, that repository of resources. In terms of who the targeted audience and reader is, primarily it's focused on existing functional areas. But as I said, also those subnational authorities that are contemplating working across subnational scales, so the supra-municipal jurisdiction. So existing functional areas at different levels of maturity, those that have just been established, but also mature ones that are looking at evolving the topics that they deal with and strengthening their governance. There are a few instances where the toolkit also directs itself to regional and national authorities. And here, in particular, where we talk about some of the, in particular around governance and financing, recognizing that in particular, national authorities are responsible for creating an enabling environment. So there are some instances where the lessons and the tools would be best targeted and consumed by national authorities, but it is primarily targeting functional areas. In terms of the structure of the toolkit, it's got 6 building blocks. You can see in this building blocks are effectively the chapters of the toolkit, and there's a lot of cross-reference between the different chapters. It is not designed, or rather it is designed to enable you to dip into a chapter at a time, depending on what you're dealing with. So you could, if you're interested in governance, you could go directly to the governance and administrative capacity. So it's structured in a manner that allows you to understand that chapter in totality, even the references that are used per chapter, including the recommendation. So do not be overwhelmed when you see the size of the toolkit. It's not intended to be read from page to page, rather like the Bible, depending on what you're dealing with. In terms of the structure, each chapter starts off with identifying challenges, practical insights and tools, as well as recommendations. So for each of the chapters, this is the order that you'll see. And then the toolkit itself starts off with an executive summary. So for people who are not able to read the whole thing, you'll see the areas that it deals with in the executive summary, as well as the, as well as a summary of the recommendations in the executive summary. So let's get a little bit into a bit of detail. As I said, it's structured in six chapters. I'm not going to go through them now because we're going to get into them one by one. And these chapters are aligned with the challenges and the topics that were raised by the functional area. So when Greg showed that slide that had the multiple blocks of all the challenges, And we specifically looked at the most recurring challenges, and these are the ones that kind of formed the core of the chapters, and others are dealt with as challenges within the chapters, but we tried to address the full universe of challenges that were raised. And you'll see that in the toolkit, there are two recurring and transversal themes. One is building and sustaining partnerships. The other one is a use of data to support decision making. Again, this is an issue that came up when Greg delved into some of those challenges, in particular around data to support decision making. When you look at the toolkit, you also see that there isn't a single chapter that is titled implementation. And this is deliberate because the entire toolkit is geared towards implementation. So for instance, when you look at the strategy chapter, it's not about how to formulate a strategy, but specifically how to build a strategy that is implementation orientated. So again, this is a focus that runs right through the toolkit. I'm going to go chapter by chapter now. So starting with chapter 1 and just give you a sense of what's in the chapter, what are the recommendations, and share with you one also practical insight from each one. So the first chapter deals with a strategic focus. It responds to 3 key challenges. One is formulating an integrated strategy. So, and here, every time we talk about integrated, we talk about sectoral integration. So among sectors, we talk about vertical integration across municipalities, for instance. And then we also talk about integration. So this is horizontal, across municipalities, vertical integration between different levels of government. And the other most important dimension of integration that we talk about relates to between government and non-government entities. Yeah, so the consistent involvement of external stakeholders. So the second challenge deals with identifying and prioritizing functional level projects. Given limited resources and extensive needs, that ability to target and focus on key projects is important. And the third challenge is around measures to support participatory implementation, again, with a focus on engaging citizenry. And this, I'm going to keep going back to this stakeholder engagement. One of the challenges that we raised was around limited capacity, and we see both in literature, but in particular from successful functional areas, that part of their success has been in how they're able to leverage stakeholders and resources that sit in academia, in private practice, in NGOs, in their respective areas of jurisdiction. The recommendations: the importance of identifying early wins, so focusing on interventions that can demonstrate the success of interjurisdictional cooperation, using data to inform decision-making. I think the point has been made around this already. Identifying key flagship projects that are visionary, that are consistent with the ambition of the functional area, because these are helpful in mobilizing resources, energies to give effect to what the existence of the functional area. And the next one is around stakeholder engagement across all phases of strategy formulation. So from analysis, whether it's done just by the managing body for the functional area, the governance body, or working with academia, for instance, to planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. So making sure that there's a room and scope for stakeholder engagement right through the strategy formulation process. Just dipping into an example, a practical insight, we're going to draw from Brno metropolitan area. One of the things that is really interesting that they've done is identifying projects that have a functional area-wide importance and footprint. So one of those is the flood protection measures. I mean, this is obviously an issue that traverses administrative boundaries. Even small municipalities see the value thereof, and so they can see themselves, their contribution and their benefit at the metropolitan area level. And so this ability to conceptualize projects that touch multiple jurisdictions within the municipality, that are scaled appropriately at different scales within the metropolitan area or the functional area, is really important as a rallying point, I guess, for sustained engagement by different municipalities. And it worked, is working in Brno, and would similarly have similar benefits in other functional areas. Another key insight from Brno is how they responded to experience need to collaborate across boundaries. So the existence of BMA is not driven by legislation, but it's a direct response to needs that are identified that traverse administrative boundaries. And it's been really interesting in the engagements that we've had with them, and looking at the work that they've done, how this focus on and nurturing the evolution of a metropolitan governance level in the Czech Republic is having spillover effects potentially to the national response to supporting what is happening in BMA. And then finally, just the importance of creating a common vision and backing this up with institutional strengthening measures. So in the Integrated Development Strategy 21 plus, BMA is looking at expanding the areas that they deal with beyond those that are financed by ITI, as Greg mentioned earlier, to expand that to respond to issues that they have in particular, but also keeping an eye on the importance of strengthening institutions, building local capacity, and focusing part of that on the smaller municipalities to close those capacity gaps that often prevail at when working at a functional area scale. So we get into a little interactive exercise now that you've got experience with the whiteboard. If you could use a whiteboard to identify, using just one word, the main factor that helped your strategy formulation process to be successful. So both the strategy formulation as well as strategy implementation in your respective functional areas. So if you think about what worked, what were the kind of interventions, issues that worked? Was it stakeholder mobilization, for instance? Was it identification of a common vision or common issue? I see one word there, that's prioritization. That's super important. See participation. Yeah, I'm assuming participation of different stakeholders, government, non-governmental, but active participation. Diagnosis, yeah, so that initial kind of analytical stage where you use, I'm assuming when you say diagnosis, is combining the science and the art, no? So the science being the use of data, the art being usually the remit of politics to identify the issues that need to be responded to. Time, that's an interesting one. So we'll come back to this. I'm curious on the person that wrote time, perhaps in the chat, if you could elaborate on what you mean by time. Was it having the time to put the strategy together, or was it in fact not having time? If you could perhaps in the chat just indicate what you mean by time. Internal expertise, this is absolutely critical. And what we've seen is that often the kind of core city will seed or incubate the establishment of that internal capacity and internal expertise to drive this functional area approach. You'll see in the toolkit when we deal with governance and capacity building, we also share a number of resources that functional areas can access to build that capacity. I'm assuming that internal capacity and team relate to more or less the same thing. Okay, I'm going to move on and we'll keep this. There's a comment that says vision, absolutely super important. So a single unifying vision around which a coalition of the willing can be built is absolutely important. I mean, in the toolkit, we also talk about the importance of political leadership, no? We've seen that where you have political leaders that are deliberate in reaching out, building collaboration across administrative boundaries, this is something that is also very important in building the basis for interjurisdictional cooperation. Okay. Human-centered communication. Thank you very much. So we're going to move back to the presentation. Thank you, and we'll keep this, and we'll maybe come back to them later on. Thank you. So that was chapter 1. Thank you. So moving back to the toolkit, moving on to chapter 2. So chapter 2 deals with the territorial focus. And the two key challenges that we tried to respond to here. The first one is, how do you delineate the optimal territorial scale. Yeah. So is it 1 or 2 municipalities that share boundaries? Is it 150? Where do you draw? Where do you draw the line? And here I spoke about the combination of art and science. So we share some tools to support the science part of this around, for instance, using evidence-based and data to support the decision ultimately on where to draw the boundary, but also appreciating that this is not an entirely scientific exercise. Yeah, so it does also depend on the enthusiasm, the willingness of different administrations to cooperate and what it is that there's agreement to cooperate over. The second challenge is about how to harness urban-rural linkages. And then this is something that that Greg raised when he highlighted the challenges. This is absolutely critical so that the relationship between urban areas and their surrounding peri-urban and rural areas is a mutually beneficial one, yeah, so that the rural areas are not recipients of the negative externalities of urbanization. And the toolkit does share some examples on how to strike this balance between urban areas and rural areas, and some tools to do this. In terms of recommendations, again, the importance of evidence-based decision-making, at the very least, as a basis on which a discussion can happen on where to draw the boundaries, what the issues are that the functional area should deal with primarily, yeah? So that it's not just driven by sentiment, but it's also backed by evidence. The importance of how the composition of a governance structure is contemplated to make sure that it reflects the profile of constituting municipalities. Again, this is an important intervention to make sure that we can strengthen the awareness of the rural-urban challenges, because if it's only urban, then the rural issues will fade and will not get the prominence that they require, and vice versa. And the third recommendation is around the importance of leveraging existing partnerships. Often in these administrations, there are existing knowledge groups, NGOs, academia, and so on that are working in some or other sphere, and it is absolutely critical to leverage those networks to contribute to the decisions and the contemplation of how to delineate functional area boundaries. Moving on, as an example, to a practical insight from Romania. And here, for those national authorities that are present today, this would be an interesting one to look at. So Romania's legislative landscape already recognizes the metropolitan areas and gives or confers powers and functions and attributions to them, including financial mechanisms. What's interesting is how the delineation of these metropolitan areas was considered, and Marcel and colleagues can get into this in a lot more detail if you wish. But, so with the exception of Bucharest, which is the capital, the focus was on creating a series of crowns. Yeah, so the core city and the municipalities that share boundaries with it would be the first crown, followed by the next city and the municipalities that share boundaries. And this coherence across the territory is to make sure that there's integration in the planning, implementation, and management, and to avoid a race to the bottom, yeah, so that there isn't unhealthy competition between urban areas. It's just another key lesson from the Romania experience is how the existing legislation also provides a basis and guides for sharing competencies. So constituting municipalities can confer some of their responsibilities to the metropolitan area. I think this is a similar arrangement as exists in West Athens with ASDA, where the municipalities that make up ASDA have given some responsibilities to ASDA, if I remember, Moscow, with the exception of solid waste management. And in the Romania case, it's important to note that these do not have to start off as transferred or devolved powers and functions. They could be gradual, starting off, for instance, around uniting land use planning, setting a common base of addressing challenges, and over time, as the institutions mature, could translate to a devolution of certain powers and functions, and even fiscal authority. And then the other key issue to note with the Romania example is the recognition of the importance of this scale, so that kind of middle-sized brush that Greg made reference to, and making sure that there are targeted resources to this. So in the Romania example, so metropolitan areas are funded, one by member municipalities, but also 5% of taxes that are generated are directed to this level of government to give it the financial resources to be able to implement the powers and functions and attributions that they have. We'll move on. The next chapter is governance. This is one of the really important, this was one of the most recurring challenges, I think, from the functional areas that we dealt with. The challenges that we highlight here, three challenges. One is on how to establish a functional area governing body. And here there are various approaches that the methodological toolkit deals with, from soft measures where you start with just creating a common platform for some recurring processes. For instance, I think this is an example from Poland where they rationalized policies and procedures as a basis for building this kind of functional area governance body. There are voluntary associations that are not backed by any legislation. I think Brno is a classic example, and much more legally established functional areas, such as in Barcelona, for instance, that are recognized not just in law, but as a level of government in terms of the constitutional makeup of the country. The second challenge is how to build and maintain partnerships, and the importance of these partnerships being part of the governance system and not as an add-on, not as an afterthought. And so how to design processes that actively engage external stakeholders in the governance of the functional area. Again, it's also an approach to strengthening and bolstering capacity, and then fostering knowledge and capacity building. We spoke earlier, and it came up in the whiteboard that you did with Greg, that one of the key challenges is the capacity of smaller municipalities. And what we've seen is that successful functional areas are those that foster knowledge and capacity building to close those capacity asymmetries between the core city and some of the smaller municipalities. In terms of recommendations, it is clear that where the approach, the establishment of a governance body is progressive, it tends to be more successful where form follows function. There's agreement on what the issue or the vision is that is to be addressed, and the powers and functions and the institution around this all evolve over time as the institutions themselves mature. And Barcelona is a classic example of this, where stakeholder engagement has to be core and structured as part of the governance system. I mean, the interesting examples, for instance, in Slovakia, around vocational education and training, where the partnerships with the private sector is embedded in the operation of some regional activities, and then mobilizing capacity building resources, as I said, to close capacity gaps. We'll move on. Just to dip into an example, Barcelona, I think I mentioned this already. Here, interjurisdictional cooperation has sustained over a long period. It started in as far back as 1953. It was only legally established in 2011. And it started off with a much narrower remit in terms of powers, functions, and responsibilities, and over time has matured and taken on much greater responsibility. Today, the Barcelona metropolitan area has the authority to plan, formulate policies, regulations, and implement investments. And this is something that has matured over time. And I think this is an important principle to consider as you evolve. So another interactive session. So if you think about your own governance structure, could you maybe just write briefly about how you think it could be further strengthened to improve implementation? So what are the measures, interventions that you think could help to improve implementation in your respective functional areas currently? National law, so enabling legislation. This is a recurring thing that has come up, and I think this is a key message to national authorities. So on the one end is the creation of enabling legislation, on another maybe to just remove limitations or hindrances and support the evolution of functional approaches. Mhm. Okay. See a lot of boxes moving around and lines. There's a comment there on pilot projects financed by the cohesion policy. Okay, so the ability to test no regret interventions, no regret investments that allow you to demonstrate and test even the governance structures. Yeah, thank you. Aha, so even technical support. Okay. Okay, so sharing best, so what is that? Access to best practice or seeing best practices on how other places have approached the governance issue. There are some in the toolkit, so you'll be pleased to see that. Common standards at EU level. Is this common governance standards at EU level? I mean, again, I'd be keen to hear what that in detail, perhaps in the chat, because you'll recall Greg made the point in his presentation as well earlier that appreciating that there are different legislative and regimes in the different member states, that functional approaches have to mold to those realities. So it'd be interesting to see what you mean when you say common governance standards at EU level, because we've seen the whole, as I said, the range from soft intervention, soft power, right through to legislation. So it would be, if you could maybe expand on that in the chat, and we'll come back to it. Technical assistance to tackle lack of local competence. Local competence, I'm assuming you mean capacity, right? So not necessarily talking about giving more authority to local authorities, but rather the capacity to discharge the responsibilities that they have. Okay. Thank you for this. So perhaps okay, there's one person who's writing, and after that we move back to the presentation. Adoption to local specificities. Okay, so responding to local context, yeah? Again, this is really, really critical. So in environments, for instance, where collaboration is the norm, it may be easier to do that even through voluntary structures. In some environments where it's not as easy and it requires national enabling legislation, or at least sufficient signaling and incentives from national authorities and managing authorities, that may be a key issue. Thank you very much. So let me move on. We've got 2 more chapters to deal with before we finish. Marcel, I'm still okay with time, yeah? I'm flying through.
You're doing great, Yundela. You're really
Thank
great.
you.
So don't rush.
Okay. So the next chapter is on cross-sectoral integration. This is probably one of the most challenging chapters for us to work on for a number of reasons. One is, as I mentioned earlier on, every time we talk about integration, we refer to integration across different sectors, so spatial planning, mobility, environment, and so on. It's also integration across different levels of government. So, and the importance of making sure that at a functional area, there's alignment to national, to supranational, national, regional strategies, and so on. And then another dimension is integration between government and non-government. So pulling these 3 dimensions of integration together consistently was really challenging. And this is the reality of the environment within which you have to operate. And so the challenges that we focused on, so again, with those 3 dimensions of integration that we're pursuing, we thought to focus on 2 challenges, and that is 2 different scales. One is how to support cross-sectoral integration at a functional area level. So across municipal boundaries, different sectors, different stakeholders, and the importance of strengthening strategy and spatial planning. Again, Greg made the point, this is probably one of the most recurring areas of integration, the interplay between strategy, spatial planning, and in many instances, again, mobility, but certainly with spatial planning, this was a key issue. Examples, for instance, from Poland, from Rzeszów in Poland, on integrated spatial planning to synchronize spatial planning strategies and support coherence in the spatial policies that are made to make sure that there isn't a loss of opportunity, yeah, because each municipality is considering its own realities and not thinking beyond that. And so some of the tools that are highlighted in the toolkit is like the land suitability analysis. So many GIS-based instruments are really, really helpful in helping to visualize the opportunities that exist, to cohere a strategy, a spatial strategy on which areas should we protect, which areas are mutually beneficial that we can put infrastructure in. The second challenge that we looked at is cross-sectoral integration at a project level. So how do you put together an integrated project, and again, at different scales? And some of the recommendations coming out of this, the first one is that determining the most important sectors that are critical to integrate within that functional area is key. I mean, integration can be a task in and of itself, yeah, and it shouldn't be. It should be an enabler. So depending on the vision that the functional area is collaborating towards, this is where the determination of which sectors are important to integrate around. The second one is around being clear on stakeholder involvement. So which stakeholders, and then the third component of this integration is the different scales at which this integration needs to happen. In particular, looking at the neighborhood scale, the municipality scale, and then the functional area scale. So the ability to intervene at different scales is important. So for instance, if you think about investments in mass transit, public transport, this creates opportunities for transit-oriented development. Yeah, so this is something that can be articulated at a functional area scale. But distilling that down to neighborhood level, what the design around each station, and I think this is one of the areas that Bruno has done quite a lot of work in, what each node, each TOD looks like, can be a very neighborhood level intervention that allows engagement of stakeholders in that neighborhood. And this creates or has potential to create a daisy chain of investments and activations that collectively contribute to a functional area intervention. So thinking about integration at a functional area level, pulling that down to a very local scale, i.e. neighborhood scale, and making sure that the projects and interventions that are conceptualized are integrated. And there are a few tools that the toolkit highlights, for instance, the new European Bauhaus that supports project level integration. So move on to the next slide. So an example of cross-sectoral integration, Cluj in Romania. Here, the kind of core idea that the integration was around was the Net Zero Cities Action Plan, which is a joint climate action built on a local coalition for climate neutrality. What's really interesting about the approach that Cluj amongst others, took is that it was built from existing plans and strategies. Yeah, so it wasn't a complete wipeout of everything that was there. And I think, again, this is an important lesson to ensure continuity of investments, of effort, and of logic. The Cluj Net Zero Cities Action Plan also worked with multiple stakeholders, was multi-sectoral, so it cohered energy, mobility, solid waste management, circularity, as well as governance and innovation, yeah, recognizing the importance of the institutional leg to support implementation. And it was across the metro area. So the action plan is across the metro area, and the investments in different parts of the metropolitan area. And it used many of the tools that are discussed in the toolkit, such as the use of data to inform decision making and so on. So one more interactive session. This is the second last time. We have one more after this. So if you could, again, using the whiteboard, list the top 3 sectors in your functional area that require or that are central to integration. So if you think about the strands that are important for you to pull together, what would those top 3 be in your functional area or metropolitan area for that matter? Julieta, that is really interesting. So data management, climate adaptation, and social affairs. And again, I'm assuming that this is also informed by the reality of the constituting municipalities, right? That are making up the governance body. Energy, biodiversity, and social inclusion. Okay. Transport, spatial planning, education network. Interesting. Green and blue infrastructure. Transport infrastructure, creative industry, and energy sector. Aha. So the data management in sectors in which local strategy is focused. Okay. So collecting data that's necessary. Okay, this is really interesting. I mean, this question around data is a recurring one, and we'll pick up on this, I think, later on as well. So, I mean, if you look at what you've just mentioned, it's clear that there isn't a set menu of sectors that must be integrated. That the priority sectors that you focus on in integration is driven by your context and reality in terms of the vision and what the functional area governance body sees as priority, and obviously what is necessary to enable the realization of those priorities. Okay. Thank you. So we can move back. We've got 2 more chapters of the toolkit to deal with. So it's interesting to see that there's one that just has spatial planning. So integrate spatial planning. That's the that's the key priority. So interesting to see that. Okay, so the next chapter, this is the second to last. Chapter 5 is on funding and finance. The 2 challenges that we focused on here is optimizing EU funds at a functional area level and mobilizing additional financial resources. On optimizing EU funds, we've looked for examples on and create a repository of information on dedicated EU funds and examples of how they've been used in other functional areas. We've also shared examples of how functional areas have also developed and applied interesting instruments like revolving funds in Oradia to help smaller capacity municipalities to finance project preparation and co-financing costs. Yeah, so recognizing that this might be a limiting factor to develop instruments to close that, to make sure that even the smaller capacitated municipalities are still able to contribute. And the idea of a revolving fund is also quite interesting because as it is paid back, there's a collective agreement on what else it is used for. One of the tools that's shared in the toolkit is a repository of EU funds that can be used by functional areas. And then around mobilizing additional financial resources, so from borrowing to triple Ps and how to prepare for triple Ps. and an underappreciated perhaps area that functional areas can have real contribution in is investment attraction, retention, and expansion. So not necessarily through cash, so to speak, but by improving the economic competitiveness of these areas. In terms of recommendations, the importance of pursuing a mix of funding sources, recognizing limitations to participation by smaller municipalities, and finding solutions to this, as I said, such as the revolving fund from Moradia as an example of this, and a coherent institutional response for investment attraction and expansion, again, so that there isn't negative competition within the territory. Looking at an example, from Krakow in Poland on mobilizing private sector financing. The KMA, the Krakow Metropolitan Area, developed a joint database of investment opportunities. So in particular sites that are ripe for investment, and made these possibilities known to investors. So these opportunities across the entire metropolitan area. And linked to this, they packaged investments that also have opportunities for PPP, so bundled investments that have opportunities for PPP. And this has multiple benefits. One, it optimizes the economies of scale, that functional area, again, one of the benefits of functional areas, so that the investments are chunky enough to reduce transaction costs. They can compensate for capacity limitations in smaller municipalities. There's a single negotiation, for instance, on a package of investments, as opposed to each municipality potentially negotiating a PPP on smaller investments. And this obviously improves the negotiation capability of municipalities, contributing, as I said, to realizing economies of scale. The last chapter is on monitoring and evaluation. And there was a question in the comments on whether there's any guidance on monitoring and evaluation at a functional area scale. Here we looked at 3 challenges. One is on functional area level data to enable M&E at that scale. Again, this is something that Greg had raised, that we've had functional areas, they're concerned that the data is not aggregated to that scale, and that can be problematic. The examples in the toolkit on how data repositories have been created to support supra-municipal strategy implementation and monitoring and evaluation. Again, this is an area of possible support by national and regional authorities. In the toolkit, we also share tools or geospatial and geostatistical open data monitoring resources that can be utilized. The second challenge is how to monitor at that level, at the functional area level. And in the toolkit, we share examples on how to integrate both qualitative and quantitative indicators, and to ease visualization of data that enables external stakeholders to also engage and builds a platform for participatory monitoring and evaluation. So Evelina, the question that you asked, there certainly are tools in the toolkit that could help look at monitoring and evaluation at a functional area level. An example. So from Poland, the Polish Union of Metropolises, which created data observatories. It's made up of 12 core cities, and it established a data observatory to monitor and evaluate supra-municipal strategies. The data observatory is a one-stop shop with over 200 data sets that are grouped around key thematic areas that are consistent with the strategies. And the observatory has a very user-friendly interface that allows people to choose the functional area or the metropolitan area that they're interested in, and on each of the thematic areas can see the data and the performance of that particular metropolitan area with easily understandable and visualized graphics. And now for the last interactive session and also the last slide, just a sense of whether you've had any experience with participatory monitoring and evaluation. And if you had, what has that experience been like? So in the work that you do, is monitoring and evaluation designed to be participatory and involved external stakeholders? And what has that experience been like? certainly in the work that we did looking at this seems to be an area that has a lot of potential for growth, because it allows stakeholders to stay engaged not only early on in identifying challenges, but right through implementation and monitoring and evaluation. Yeah, it's also a platform for collecting data and sharing data. I agree. It is very resource intense, especially setting up the processes at the onset. I think the idea of AI is actually quite an interesting one. The question is whether AI becomes a stakeholder or use AI to also process the input that comes from external stakeholders. I mean, it would be interesting to see. I think that was Julieta. When you say that it is a demanding process, perhaps in the chat, and I do appreciate, I'm keeping an eye on the chat, perhaps in the chat, if you can provide any bit of detail on, yes, demanding, in your view, is it worth it? Yeah.
I think, Yandela, that you keep asking more and more complex questions, and then at the stage of when you get into more complex, then you are getting fewer answers.
Which is okay. We started at a high and we're tempering off. Yeah. So I'm really appreciating that the responses and comments in the chat, they are providing very useful insights. Beneficiaries are not doing it seriously, okay? For someone, it was so frustrating. All they could do is draw a line on the whiteboard. Limited benefit, that's interesting. Okay. I mean, this is certainly an area of opportunity that would be useful for us to explore. So Greg, Marcel, in putting together the community of practice, this might be because I think that the comments that are raised are absolutely valid. Yeah, so it is a very demanding process. Beneficiaries may not be fully engaged, and so the cost benefit analysis may not look positive. But there are some solutions, and there are some that are shared in the toolkit of ways of making that a little less resource intense, so that we can get the benefit, and not just the benefit in terms of the data, but also in keeping the external stakeholders actively engaged in the process. Colleagues, thank you very much. That takes us to the end of the presentation. As I said when we started, the toolkit is being finalized. As soon as it is finalized, we'll send a link to all of you and put it up on the website. Thank you very much. Marcel, over to you.
Thanks so much, Yandela. I love that you said that we can read the methodological toolkit like the Bible, and I think it is the Bible of a functional areas now. I know the information is dense, folks, but I promise you'll find something that's a lot of stuff that will be useful for you in the toolkit. It helped a lot, I think, that we moved from working with the originally planned 2 functional areas to 24, because you saw from Yandela's presentation, there's a lot of richness that we managed to extract directly from the functional area. So the majority of these recommendations, they're not, let's say, picked out of thin air. They actually sort of relate to things done by your peers. And again, since we started working on the functional areas, we see increased interest in it. As I said, both the Hungarian and the Polish presidency want to make this as a key topic. But as we speak, there's the Eurocities conference in Cluj, where František, our colleague from Brno, is giving a presentation, and Vice Mayor Jakub Mazur from Wroclaw will be in Brno soon for another Eurocities conference, like with a focus on metropolitan areas. We're super happy that EUI has adjusted sort of like the way they fund fund programs to allow functional areas to apply. And then we saw, for example, that a lot of functional areas have recently managed to secure funding, EUI funding, which is absolutely great. And then we hope, as Greg said, that sort of there's a community of practice that will start working independently from now on. We know there was a community of practice before we started this project, but we hope we manage to help strengthen it a bit. Without further ado, I'll launch my presentation. I will try to keep it short.
As you see, colleagues, it's only 92 slides, so Marcel will keep it very short.
Yes. We won't go through all the slides we promise, but the presentation will be made available after the conference. Even the 90 slides don't really do justice to all the work that's been done. We'll try to give you a glimpse. From what I saw, I think we have all of the 24 functional areas connected. We'll have a question and answer session at the end. You may want sort of like to ask some of the functional areas directly. We hope not to put them on the spot, but just so you know, like that, I mean, they're here and can provide insights as well. Again, as Marek presented at the beginning, that's sort of like a lot of work that went into the project. Most of the results are available on the functionalareas.eu project. I won't harker too much on this. This is just a snippet of what's available there on the website. For example, we had 12 knowledge exchange events. The recordings, the presentations are available online if any of the topics will be of interest to you. There's also testimonials from the functional areas. The different events organized are also archived on the website. We collected best practices.
Sorry, Marcel, could you put in presentation mode? Sorry.
Sorry, it's not.
No.
Is it now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry. So we have good best practices from the 12 functional areas we provided targeted support to, but also other functional areas in the EU. A lot of guides and tools that you can easily access. I will talk briefly about some of those. The work with the functional areas was developed around individual action plans with a total of 66 activities. And again, the number of activities different from functional area to functional area. This was based on the needs expressed by the functional areas themselves. What was interesting about the project is that the functional areas went through a selection process. So obviously, like we ended up working with functional areas that wanted to receive support, and that obviously made our work easier. But also, I think the results are also richer because there's sort of clear interest from the different functional areas, some more mature, some less mature, but there are clear interests to figure out how they can strengthen functional area approaches. And I think that the project is richer because of this. Again, a brief outlook of the type of support and then the support areas covered in the project. As said, most of these are available on the website, so you have a way to sort of quickly link to the website using this link. And then we'll go through some key activities we've done with the individual functional areas. We'll focus in the presentation on the 12 functional areas that received targeted support, but we'll mention others as well. So with the Zagreb urban agglomeration, we went through different types of works, support with the integrated urban development strategy, setting up a metropolitan GIS database, helping with the development of one of their flagship projects proposed for ITI financing. One project that we particularly like and that I would underscore here, again, the selection is based on my advice, what I thought were the projects that sort of are more that stuck with me. If you want a sort of support for a program to green courtyards, and it's super interesting because the program one, I mean, it managed to receive dedicated financing for this, but it's also the type of program that's easily scalable. Urban courtyards are often semi-public spaces that are not properly utilized, and they can help both to address climate change, but they also help improve quality of life in the city, sort of if access to the courtyards is smartly developed. We worked sort of one of the metropolitan areas where we applied the land suitability analysis. We'll talk about this a bit later, which in this case, the colleagues, the leadership in Zagreb was particularly interested in finding out areas in the metropolitan area that are more suitable to develop social housing. Brno, as said, František is now in Cluj at the Eurocities conference, where he's talking about urban-rural links. We went through different activities. Brno is among the more advanced, more mature functional areas, and they also provided lots of examples for others. From my point of view, one of the more interesting activities was the application of the land suitability analysis in Brno, particularly with the focus on figuring out sort of areas that may be suitable for private investments. The interesting thing about Brno is that it's a data-rich environment. Czechia provides all the cadastre data, lots of GIS data freely. So running this analysis was super easy. And then if you compare that to a country like Romania, for example, where only 55% of the cadastre is available, and then where running such an analysis requires much more investments, both time and resources. It's clear that sort of the simple things can help can have a big impact. Greg discussed about the importance of data, both for analysis purposes, but also for monitoring and evaluation purposes at the functional area level. Again, urban-rural links. František is actually discussing on this topic at the Eurocities conference in Cluj. West Athens, we loved working with West Athens. Loved working with all the functional areas. I see Moscow's is connected. Maybe to mention here what we thought like was particularly impactful is that we worked on a portfolio of investment projects. One of our colleagues, Nikos, facilitated a meeting with several central government entities, and I see Marina's connected, and we thank Marina and the colleagues that participated at that session very much. Basically, there was a discussion on a number of additional project ideas, which resulted in additional EU financing for these key projects. Obviously, result which we're very happy with, and we hope the colleagues in West Athens were happy as well. There's several exchanges. These are images from an exchange with Sector 6 in Bucharest, which is done particularly well in identifying strategic development areas where they managed to attract private investors. Moving on to Lake Balaton, we had a rich set of activities. The one that I will mention here is sort of the methodology we used to assess the impact of climate change. There's a guide that's available on the website where we also introduce a way to assess heat islands to calculate, making it easy for others that want to do this type of analysis. The information is available there. You can run basically the analysis on your own. Obviously, livelihoods and lives of the people in Lake Balaton will be impacted by climate change, from water evaporation to sort of loss of income from tourism, and also from impact on the natural area. We worked on a host of other activities, including support with the delivery of the European Living Lakes Association, the support for cooperation in the European Living Lake Association, organization of the World Lake Conference, and so on. As said, Lake Balaton will be hosting a conference together with Coter on functional areas in July. Kalisko-Ostrovska was an interesting functional area. Sort of it's an untypical functional urban area in the sense that you have two strong urban centers that sort of disseminate development around them, which makes for different dynamics than the usual functional urban area that's forms around a dynamic urban city. Here we worked a lot on figuring out how to strengthen functional area approaches. Kalisko-Ostrovska already has sort of like quite strong functional area governance system, so we learned a lot from them, but they were also interested in figuring out how to strengthen these links. And then the methodological toolkit has both a number of lessons from Kalisko-Ostrovska and a number of examples and recommendations that the colleagues in Kalisko-Ostrovska can draw upon. Again, I won't harker on all the activities too much. Krakow, as Brno, one of the mature and advanced functional areas we work with. They've been super present and super engaged, and we want to thank them again because they both were willing and eager to receive a lot of input, but they were also quite generous in providing input and recommendations. We worked excellently with them. We also had like a host of activities we carried out together. I'm not going to go through all of them just because it's been quite a lot. Maybe what's important to mention is their interest in sort of figuring out how to strengthen public-private partnerships. This was a topic that we figured out was of interest to other functional areas as well. As a result, we had 2 knowledge exchange events on the topic. The information is available online. So both the presentations and the registration, the conference itself was recorded. Exactly. Thank you, Vio. And we also have a guide that was prepared specifically on how you can promote and implement PPPs. This is available on the project website. Moving on, Karash-Timish was an interesting functional area. It's a functional area that was developed around a specific project. More specifically, this was initiated by a small municipality, the municipality of Reșița, which wanted to sort of bank on its proximity to Timișoara, one of the most developed cities in Romania. And they prepared together both railway project, which actually also managed to secure funding, but they were also interested in working with us on developing urban regeneration concepts for the main rail stops along this rail link. What's important to note is that sort of as we discussed with the folks in Karash-Timiș, we were drawn in a working group that's organized by the Ministry of Transport in Romania. We shared some of these results. We developed some ideas, and then we ended up with several, actually all of the functional areas that we work with. So Oradea, Cluj, Giu Valley, Bucharest, Brașov, and Constanța, being interested in doing this type of work. 4 of them also have managed to secure financing from the OP Transport for interventions in their metropolitan train systems, and they're also, several of them are also preparing feasibility studies for urban regeneration projects around the metropolitan train stops. So definitely one of the more impactful activities we have done. Cluj, as said, they're hosting the Eurocities conference now, including a session on functional areas and urban-rural links. What I would mention here is that we worked with them on developing the first action plan for transition to climate neutrality by 2030. It was sort of like the first such plan that was done. As Yondela said, we basically built on existing strategies rather than sort of like it often happens, starting with a tabula rasa and doing a parallel strategic planning process. What's also notable is that the Cluj model was used to help other cities that are interested in making the transition to climate neutrality. So we had very good dialogue with the 5 cities in Poland that are included in the 100 climate neutral cities mission. Krakow, where we had very good collaboration, and they're also like among the more advanced on the preparation of their plan. Wrocław, Warsaw, Łódź, and Rzeszów. We provided support to Bucharest, and we also work closely with Oradea, Brașov, and Iași in Romania to help them to sort of advance their action plans for transition to climate neutrality. We also shared the example with Pécs in Hungary and discussed with colleagues in Budapest that were interested in the Cluj experience. So again, a quite impactful activity that sort of like from one small collaboration that ended up benefiting several other functional areas. We work with them sort of like on urban regeneration and street art. I won't hark here too much on this. We worked on exporting of best practices from the core city, from Cluj, to the peri-urban localities, particularly on urban regeneration. We worked on helping them develop a metropolitan brand and identity, on securing funding for an European Bauhaus major project. Again, these results, some of these results, you can look in more detail in the presentation. Some will be made available on the website. Geo-Valley and geo-conurbation, it's difficult here to just focus on one thing, just because Adina will be very mad with me if I only discuss about one. It's a community with a lot of, like, a big heart and a big soul. We encourage you to visit if you ever make the time. We promise you'll remain connected to the area. Obviously, Geo-Valley is one of it's the most known mining area in Romania, and geo-conurbation includes 3 just transition regions: Hunedoara, Gorj, and Dolj, which for this project decided to work together. They basically said, like, let's figure out how we can work together to address some of the common challenges that we have. Very interesting collaboration, quite impactful projects, again, from development of the communication strategy to concrete urban regeneration interventions, most led by the community and then by local actors, which was absolutely fantastic, including initiatives that received awards like the EU Transformative Action Award. Work that we've done on how to secure funding for innovative green investments and technologies. We've applied the land suitability analysis at a grander scale to figure out plots of land that are more suitable for solar interventions, wind farm interventions, or for afforestation. Again, the land suitability methodology is available on the project website. Provided the data is available, running the land suitability analysis can be done relatively easy if there's basic GIS expertise at the local level. Oradea metropolitan area is probably the most advanced metropolitan area in Romania. We've done a lot of innovative things with them. I would mention the first one. It's basically, we've developed probably the most comprehensive metropolitan GIS database in Romania, drawing also on a lot of open source information. And then on the website, we have a guide that provides a list of open source GIS data. And quite interestingly, we use this data. We're working with several municipalities in Ukraine, and the municipalities in Ukraine are interested sort of like in accessing this open GIS data, both for conflict and post-conflict planning. Again, some of the data points are sort of like the geo-reference list of companies, along with revenues, profits, number of employees, and so on, that the folks in Oradea want to use for better both strategic and spatial planning. For example, where to best place a logistics center. We worked on a compendium of key performance indicators, on the planning for the metropolitan bike infrastructure, including support with application for different funding to develop this infrastructure. Again, won't harker too much on this. Maybe just to mention that they managed to secure funding both for their metropolitan train system, so quite a substantial financing, but they've also started to implement the urban regeneration of the area around the main train station. So quite happy that sort of like the road from idea to implementation was very short in this case. West Yalomytsa functional area, they were the baby on the block, sort of like the youngest functional area in the group we worked with. They started basically from a need to plan the extension of the gas infrastructure, and then to implement, sort of like to develop this infrastructure, they had to have economies of scale. So they needed to have several municipalities that participated in the project. And this is the genesis of a lot of functional areas. So like oftentimes it comes from a concrete need, from a need to implement infrastructure project or to deliver public service in a more efficient way. What we did like a lot here was to work to go from that distinct need and develop a package of projects and programs that go beyond just the extension of the gas infrastructure, including mobility projects, urban regeneration ideas, attracting private investors, and doing economic development planning in a joint way, but also connecting, since we had Bucharest involved in here, making sure that West Yalomytsa, which is basically just outside the metropolitan area of Bucharest, is basically the donut, part of a donut around the Bucharest metropolitan area. We discussed sort of like help them to basically integrate West Yalomytsa in the metropolitan train system that's now under development in Bucharest. Again, lots of, I mean, you can see here the spatial outline. And then lastly, Trenčín in Slovakia. They a small city with very ambitious goals. What we particularly worked on here is providing support to Trenčín to prepare for the European Capital of Culture 2026. They have a package of projects that they've developed. What we really liked about this collaboration is the fact that without us knowing, we had two European Capitals of Culture for 2023. Timișoara, which is part of Taraș-Timiș, and Veszprém, which is part of Lake Balaton. And Trenčín, Timișoara, and Veszprém went for a knowledge exchange to Wrocław, which is also part of a project, which was Capital of Culture in 2016. It was a very nice exchange. And again, sort of links that have been established through the project. EU sources of funding. There's a link that we've updated all the time on the project websites. Obviously, identifying sources of funding for concrete needs was one of the things that I think all of the functional areas we work with were interested in. And the good thing is, a lot of the functional areas we work with have managed directly or indirectly through support received through this project to secure funding. Here we have just like a snippet of some of the funding that was mobilized through this project. On the communication side, again, a few data points. And then this is the last slide. Actually, no, this is the last slide. I'm very proud of myself that I managed to write thank you in the language of all the 8 member countries we worked with. But provided you have the energy and you're still with us, thank you for staying connected. Please just give us like your input on what you think the future of functional areas is. So if you can put in the chat box some aspirational thought on the future for functional areas. And I see we're good on time. I managed to stay within the allotted time. We'll have time for questions and answers as well. If there's still energy left in the engine. Okay. I see we also have a couple of questions in the chat box, but I think most of them have been addressed. With many thanks to Vio and Gabi for helping on this front. I love it. We have a vision in Greece. I think in Greek, like I tell you what my vision is after this. Like my vision after this final conference is to toast with San Sipuro. Like I think all of the people on the team will be celebrating with palinka, rakia, vodka, whatever we have. It's been a fun journey. All right. Full of opportunities. We agree. Challenging, agree. Functional areas are the engines. Couldn't agree more. Public-private partnerships, yes, absolutely agree. And the sort of like a topic that functional areas understand more, like by design, functional areas are about partnerships, about collaboration and dialogue. And then we know sort of being able to work with different actors, including the private companies, quite important. EU engines across borders, absolutely, fully agree. Like what we would like to mention here is this like an interesting outcome of this work. What we realized is that functional areas are an excellent entry point to do this type of project at the subnational level, because functional areas usually have institutional memory. They don't change as often as political leadership does. And then being more technically focused, there's also allows for easier dialogue, right? Like oftentimes if you discuss with somebody in local administration, the dialogue is a bit hampered because often they defer to the political leadership for the big decisions and ideas, whereas working with functional areas has been, in our experience, much more flexible and dynamic. Thing to keep in mind when similar projects like this will be developed. Okay. Growth, maturity. Now we're preliminary school. Like I wouldn't think that way. You now have the functional areas Bible. So Yondela sort of like preached the commandments. So you have a very strong foundation to build upon. We hope you love the document as well as some of the other resources we made available on the website. Okay. I think I think we can wrap it up, and we can save this for save the board, and then we'll share it with you once we communicate after the closure of the conference. Yandela, Greg, what do you say? We close and move to question and answers, or?
Let's move to question and answer. I want to comment, on this innovation and innovative way of thinking, because I remind on the first meeting 2 years ago with a team of the Krakow metropolitan area, and they said, how they define themselves in one sentence, like, we are a startup of administration. And this is kind of like the epitome of what functional areas are right now. So this is like kind of like going beyond the regular way of functioning and kind of like figuring out the new ways and new approaches to work and kind of bringing stakeholders together. This is not a business as usual, but this is really requires flexibility, agility, and a new way of thinking, because those are the new forms of collaboration. So this is very cool, and I also see that as a future of functional area approaches.
Thank you, Greg. We move into questions and answers. We have plenty of time, but we're also conscious that sort of we're going to be going into lunchtime, so we don't want to keep people hungry. We're hoping we'll have volunteers that want to break the ice and ask the first questions, and ask all the questions you want answers to. Be mindful that it's both us, so we can discuss about some of the project results, about some of the tools, some of the technical things that you may be dealing with. We have our colleagues from DG Regio, which finance a lot of your ideas. And again, you can ask questions related to some of the challenges you're dealing with. And obviously, we have the functional areas that were part of the projects, and maybe you want to discuss with your peers about how they solved some of the challenges you're dealing with. So who's going to be brave and break the ice? Judith, I see you smiling, please. And thank you again for the amazing, again, for being part of a project, for giving quite a lot, and sort of like also being open to advance and discuss on some of the challenges you had. Over to you.
Okay, so I could be the bravest. Thank you. But it will be maybe some reflection, not only the question, because as we gather to mark the conclusion of our project, I want to express our heartfelt gratitude for you. And this project for us has been an interesting and remarkable journey, I can say, and full of collaboration works. And first, I also want to thank behalf on our metropolitan team to the European Commission and the World Bank for their vision, for your support. Your leadership has been crucial because you addressing the challenges faces by our functional areas, and of course promoting sustainable development. And I think it's the most important at the supra-local level, not only at the local level. And I also extend my deepest appreciation to the functional areas, to colleagues from another functional areas, from 7 EU countries that actively participated in this project. Your dedication, engagement have been key to the project success. Yeah, so in helping develop our action plans, integrated planning, and promote, of course, another subject like climate neutrality. The project achievements, including the development of comprehensive toolkit, best practices, but also, for example, for us, PPP approach, was really highlight the importance of functional areas in Europe. And as we celebrate our accomplishments, we recognize the significance of this topic. And I want to emphasize that strengthening functional areas is vital for fostering regional development, economic growth, social cohesion. And this cannot be a topic overlooked in development policies in the future. So from me is like announcement to all of you. And that's well-established and legally secure functional areas have a much broader spectrum of influence on development policies and should be supported at the EU level. So I have great hope that this is not the finish, this is not the end for our project, and I hope for the continuation of such a project by the EU and World Bank in the future. So thank you all one more time.
Dziękuję bardzo, Julita. Was superb, like really great pleasure to work with you. I would say sort of like just for me, most important sort of was the exchange of ideas. I bother Greg with sort of the books that I read, and sort of like there's a recent book that I really liked. It's called The Three-Body Problem. It's a science fiction book. Long story short, I don't want to ruin, like if you decide to read, but sort of like humanity is attacked by an alien race, and what helps to save humanity is an idea, not the massive investments in armament and, not the massive investments in technology, but one simple idea. I think a project like this, sort of like one of the main merits, it's sort of that it helps sort of like cross-pollination and a ping pong of ideas, which for me has been fantastic. I know, like I'm definitely much wiser and richer after 2.5 years of working on this project. Alex, over to you. Many thanks for volunteering to come in, please.
First of all, I know I don't have a camera, it's not working, but it's better because I'm not having a very good hair day. So first of all, I would like to thank the team, of course, from the World Bank, and also the possibility to be part of this bigger project. And I take this opportunity actually to say and to think a little bit about the future. I think it's very important that, especially for the regions like Jiu Valley, where I come from, where technical assistance should be an ongoing process in development. I think there should be a possibility actually to provide some sort of help during implementation, because of course we have a lot of good documents, a lot of toolkits which are very useful, and we can actually we are starting to work on it, but especially and I'm a bit subjective because I come from a smaller region maybe, but I think at this level there needs to be some sort of help. So maybe somebody from DG Regio is noting this, and maybe we will talk in further meetings, and especially for regions in transition or regions which are experiencing a lot of change and structural change. They need also this help in implementation. Other than this, of course, as Marcel said, we are willing to, we are still trying to be an example in terms of transformation. Of course, even if the functional areas project is stopped, we can still export our models, and we will always be data for new or for other regions which are in this situation. Thank you again for the work. I know the work is now it needs to be done actually with all of the instruments that you have provided us. But at the same time, I hope we keep in touch, and actually the help is not over now, and we will actually be be part of something something bigger, because we need it, as I mentioned before. So thank you again. Just wanted to stress the need for continuation, not only to sit at the strategizing part, but also to continue on implementation. Thank you.
And thank you, Alex. I think there's going to be no problem here. If you're having a bad hair day, I have a continuous bad hair day for the past 25 years. So just wanted to thank you as well. Again, as I said in the presentation, we recommend everybody to go to Jew Valley, not just from DG Regio, from other functional areas as well. It's a wonderful example that a region that's been through a lot of hardship, and the region went from 150,000 people to under 100,000, sort of obviously. Most of the mines have been closed. There's been big economic shift and hardship, but sort of the future of the region is being revisioned, if you want, by a number of people with a very big heart, and sort of that's at the end, sort of like the future of any region. Sort of like as long as you have one person fighting for the future of that region, sort of like there's hope. And then Jew Valley and the Jew conurbation sort of is a prime example that this is possible. All right. Any other volunteers? We promise we'll reward volunteers and nice questions with drinks the moment we see each other. And then with the number of conferences on functional areas, I think we're bound to cross paths sooner rather than later. So then you can collect the drinks. Okay, Florence, please, and thank you so much. I think Vio will buy you some palinka when you meet in Balaton-Füred, but I'll compensate as well when we meet. Please, Florence, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm Florence from the COTER Secretariat in the European Committee of the Regions. Thank you very much for all the super interesting lessons from this project that I have to digest. I just wanted to indeed, and thank you, Marcel, for mentioning this seminar that we are having for COTER members, but that will be web streamed, and we'll be very happy to have online participation of some of you on 12 July in Lake Balaton. I wanted to use this opportunity to actually maybe call for input from the stakeholders in the 12 functional areas and others to maybe feed. I mean, if you have reflections on any improvements that you would see that should be brought in the post-2027 cohesion policy framework at EU level, and maybe also how you see changes at national level that would support functional areas, we would be very interested to hear about it. We will have a dedicated panel session during our seminar on this forward-looking elements. I have heard about the need for continued technical assistance and so on. But if right now you have ideas, you would like to raise the need to adapt some of the territorial tools, policy design, or anything, would be happy to have some first ideas. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Florence. We encourage you to take advantage of the offer made by Florence. COTER is probably among the most vocal entities in sort of the design of the cohesion policy. They already prepared a set of recommendations which focuses on strengthening functional area approaches, on building direct links between Brussels and the subnational leveling member countries. So we definitely encourage to take Florence upon her offer. And also many thanks, Florence, for indicating that sort of the conference in Balaton-Füred will be live streamed, which will make it easy for those interested to sort of follow the proceedings. Okay, c'est bon. Any other courageous souls, questions, reflections?
Hello. We cannot close this conference without us thanking you for all your input. Thank you, Marcel. Thank you, Viorela. Thank you, Adina, Marius, Ionut, Eugen. Thank you, everybody. It's been quite a journey for us too, and we recognize that your help is very valuable in our development. I must admit personally that the metropolitan development is more known in Oradea because of you, and more recognizable because at some point we were only a metropolitan area, and now because of your support we are more than just an association. Oradea acknowledges the fact that we should develop more towards the local authorities, local rural authorities, and we are proceeding accordingly. The mayors are aware of the situation, but because we worked with employees of the city halls, now this awareness is increased also there. Thank you again. I will be short and see you in the future projects.
Thank you so much, Leti. I will come to deliver drinks in Oradea, like with this. Although people usually go to Oradea to get palinka and get away from there, not to bring palinka, but yeah.
Drinks are on us.
Okay, even more. I'll jump on a train as soon as possible. Thank you so much, Leti. Let me then maybe give an opportunity to Gabi, Yanis, Justina, Peter, who I see is connected, Andrea, who've been basically the brains behind the project, and then our partners in crime. I know we gave them lots of headaches over the 2.5 years, but we hope they also had some nice moments. So Gabi, Yanis, Justina, Peter, Andrea, if you guys would want to come in as well. Okay, that's not a good sign. It seems DG Regio's not happy with us. Either that or they're very shy.
We cannot hear you, Gabi.
We don't hear you.
Unfortunately, no.
Probably the headphones.
Okay. I think DG Innovation may have hacked our system.
Well, Gabriel is trying to fix communication devices. Maybe I can say a couple of words from my side and also from the DG Regio side. I would like to start by saying huge thanks to the World Bank team that carried this idea and this project through 2 years, 2 exciting years, and also I would like to thank the functional areas which actually helped a lot, and to develop this project further, and also for their commitment to contribute. And without them, we couldn't be where we are right now. And I think during this project we gathered so much learnings and so much ideas that we hope that the other functional areas will use the toolbox that we developed within this project, and the 12 functional areas that was targeted within this project will continue work on their ideas further. We do very much hope that this bond and connections that was built throughout the project will continue, and the functional areas will continue to exchange the best practices, the ideas, and will work together. So thanks a lot, and thanks again, Marcel, to your team for everything that you did within this project. Thanks.
We have to thank Yanis. Thanks so much. Many thanks to Petar Tokoc too, who like put a comment in there. He was with us when we started the project, but he also supported that sort of there's much bigger effort going on functional areas. GRC is working now with Petar on a methodology for functional rural areas, where we also provided some help. And ESPON, since we see the colleagues from ESPON are connected, are working on an approach for non-standard functional areas, including just transition regions, health and aging regions, natural regions, and so on. Gabi, I don't know, like if you...
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Wow, great. I will try to put on my camera also, if it's possible. Yep. So can you hear me? Can you see me now?
Yes, and you have a good hair day, Gabi. So
okay.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, all of you. I will not repeat everything what Yanis said. I just wanted to bring again on the focus the support we are still providing related to capacity building for functional urban areas with EUI. I have inserted the link to the dedicated page that we have for city-to-city exchanges, but not only. So please take a look to this page and try to fructify these opportunities. I know that after 2 years of working with regional functional areas and functional urban areas, we have now like a nucleum of very dynamic functional urban areas, functional areas that want to continue to work together. And this is a great achievement, I think, of the project. We are trying to see if we can give them support in order to create a peer-to-peer community for functional area. And also, I would like to bring again to your attention the fact that we have a specific portal, which is Portico, dedicated also to urban and non-urban area. You will find a lot of material tools, methodologies, example of best practices, which are on this site. And finally, I want to maybe I will have one question to you, if because you worked with various types of functional area and functional urban area. And Greg mentioned 20 challenges, the main 20 challenges identified. Are there some differences in challenges between small areas like 20 administrative units and big areas like 200 administrative units in a functional area? And if there are differences, it is related to administrative capacity or to other factors. Thank you.
Greg, do you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. So as you know, this is this is a super important question about kind of like this classification of functional areas and thinking like what are their challenges. This is also why one of our challenges that we mentioned is about this kind of creation of standardized categorization of FAs. So to be able to talk about some kind of relatively uniform units which we address. Because as Gabi said, I mean, this is very true. I mean, we have functional areas that are sometimes they're focusing on a single topic, let's say tourism, or they are, you know, connected with a individual trait like a mountainous or a lake district functional area. But then we are also talking about so this is kind of like on the thematic theme, but then there is also diversification in terms of the governance and the maturity of the functional areas. So, for instance, Prague, Brno, we're talking about 100 plus, you know, 150 plus members. Then we are talking about much smaller functional areas. But the fact that something is smaller or larger doesn't mean that they are less or more advanced. Because even the smaller functional areas with smaller number of members, they can be more advanced in their collaboration and their governance setting. So it's not always like a linear, I would say, relationship that bigger it's for instance are having only this kind of challenges, and the smaller ones are having this kind of challenges. I think that the picture is, I mean, this is something that we've learned, you know, through that project, that complexity of this landscape doesn't allow for easy categorization. And I don't think that we succeeded in a kind of like creating a simple matrix that, you know, where we would say, you know, this kind of functional area will have only this kind of key challenge, and the other kind of area will need to focus on that. I think that this is still, we are not there, but that's why I also like the appeal of the colleagues before, that there is a need for more collaboration, for more exchanges, for peer-to-peer learning, because this is something that, you know, allows participants or allows functional areas in a more flexible and agile way to learn from each other without kind of like structuring it into neat tables. I mean, I wish we could, but I don't think that we had this simple answer. Thanks.
Thank you, Greg. And maybe to Gabi's point on the sort of community of practice, apart from the ping pong of ideas, what I particularly liked was sort of like that, let's say the community of practice sort of like is living and breathing sort of like, and it's going on its own, as said, like I see Eugen Pănescu connected, and I know he moderated the discussion in Timișoara on urban regeneration under the umbrella of the European Capital of Culture, but where they had like a presentation from Wrocław, again, sort of like a partnership that sort of was initiated through this project, but sort of like continued on its own. I actually thought František is in Cluj now, but I see him connected among the participants. But again, he's presenting at the Eurocities conference in Cluj, and there's sort of like many other examples of dialogue that sort of happened between the functional areas as such. Any other last ideas of wisdom? If not, I will ask Yondella, since she coordinated the functional areas Bible, maybe to give us not the 10 commandments, but maybe 3 that sort of like are more memorable for functional areas, sort of like something to help us end on an enlightened note.
Thanks, Marcel. So not 10, but 3 commandments. So I think the first one is around a progressive approach to building functional area governance, and the second one relates to a deliberate effort to work with external stakeholders. So that stakeholder mapping is an important one, and to build that into the systems and processes. And then the final one is that certainly access to resources is necessary and is an enabler, but it's not the starting point. So starting with a clear vision that has political buy-in, that's embedded in a network of stakeholders, is critical, and on the basis of that, to pursue financial resources to enable implementation. Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant. Wonderful. So on that high note, we thank you very much for making the time for participating. Again, this is not the end. This is just like a stop along the journey. For those that may have been shy today but still had questions they'd like to pose, you have Adina's email. I think everybody in Europe and the world has Adina's email now. She may be among the most famous people in the world. So like if there's other question, comments, please send them to Adina. We'll make sure to revert with an answer as soon as possible. If there's things you see on the project website, tools, guides, and so on that you would like to discuss in more detail, I guarantee we'll make the time if of interest. So many thanks for everything. Many thanks for connecting, and then again, hope our paths will cross sooner rather than later. With so many conferences on functional areas, I think that's bound to